Hey everyone, I'm Kim, the mom boss behind EmeryandK. Welcome back to my channel. Today's tumbler tutorial is this beautiful Caribbean inspired beach tumbler. It is a blizzard in Maine, but we're going to warm it up a little bit with this design. If I can do it, so can you. Let's get to it. As always, we're going to start with our fully prepped tumbler. So today I'm using a 24-ounce plump from Steel Magnolia. This one came already prepped, but otherwise you would just sand your cup, give it a good wash. Then we're going to go in with some spray paint. So we're going to be using Cheers from Colorshot. My white is Rust-Oleum, but any white you have is fine. And then also from Colorshot, we're going to be using Island Girl, Mermaid, and Cash. While we paint our cup, you're going to want to put it on some sort of arm. I am using one of my grips from the Tumbler Grip. I love these things. I never have to worry about my cups sliding off like I did on the pool noodle. We're going to go in first with the color Cheers. This is a really beautiful metallic gold, and I just want to do the very bottom of this cup. So as I'm spray painting, I'm aiming just for that bottom rim because I don't want it to come up a lot, just a teeny tiny bit. Now you're going to go in with that white right on top of that gold. Mine got chunky. I don't know if anybody else is having problems lately with the white spray paint, but it keeps getting chunky and the nozzles keep clogging, and I'm not sure why that keeps happening. But anyways, we're going to move past it. So now we're going to go in with our three kind of like turquoisey teal colors. So we're going to start with Island Girl. That's our lightest color. And I'm going to go right above that white that I painted. And don't worry if you get like too much into that white. We're going to go back in and we're going to touch it up. Now, as I'm spray painting, I have my arm about 10 to 12 inches away from my cup, and I am constantly spinning my tumbler as I'm spraying my paint. So for this first coat of spray paint, you want to just go ahead and do light. Don't get too heavy. We're just laying out where we want our colors to go and making sure that we're getting everything kind of even and how we like it. So now we're going to go in with that Mermaid. I adore this color. And again, kind of the same thing. We're going to go right above that Island Girl. And then the last color we're going to use is Cash, which is a stunning green. So while I'm spraying this Cash on, I want to make sure I get the top rim really well coated. And I want it to kind of fade just a little bit into that Mermaid. So as far as how I decide how much I want of each spray paint color, that's kind of a personal choice. You can do a little bit more of, say, Island Girl if you want, or a little bit less of Cash. That's totally up to you and kind of the aesthetic that you're going for. I prefer to have a softer color into a statement and then a little bit less of the dark color at the end. So now that I've got my colors laid out, I'm going to work my way back down my tumbler with each of my colors. And this is where I'm going to focus a little bit more on getting that kind of soft fade that I want. Now the glitters that we are using, minus the one that we're going to use for the white, they're all going to cover our base paint really well. It's not a huge deal if your colors aren't like ombre on your tumbler, perfectly. So don't stress too much about it. Just get your colors laid out. This is kind of a map for when we're going to glitter. So continue to spray paint until you're happy with it. I'm going to go back over the white, and then I'm going to go back over the gold because that got covered up a lot. And then we will go ahead and let this dry, and we will move on to our glitter. The glitter we're using today is all from the Glitter Guy. We're going to be using Baroque, Allowance, Andes, Seafoam, and Tommy. These all were in the advent calendar, but as of today, when I'm going to post this tutorial, they will all have been released. So I prefer to apply my glitter with the epoxy method. I just put a thin coat on my tumbler, not like a super thin like hang method coat, just a little bit thinner than I typically would for a regular coat of epoxy because we have some medium cut glitters in here and I want to make sure we get really good flat coverage. First, we're going to go in with that Baroque, which is just this gorgeous champagne color. This is perfect for the sand. This one is a medium cut, so I'm going to just aim for that bottom rim and I'm going to just sprinkle it on lightly. I'm really not going to tilt my cup up at all. I'm just going to kind of let it fall where it may. The medium cut glitters I find are a little bit easier to ombre with than say a fine cut because they just kind of do the work themselves. I also don't want a lot of that sandy color in my white. I just want it to be a little bit. Once we're happy with kind of the layout of our Baroque, we're going to go in with that Allowance, which is just a stunning opal. This is probably my favorite color from the advent calendar. I just adore it. So as far as sprinkling this on, I just want a super thin line right above that Baroque, right above our sand. And this is because when you go to the beach and the waves are kind of crashing onto the shore, you have that little bit of foam. That's what our Mo allowance is going to be. So I just did a thin line, and now I'm just going to tilt my cup a teeny bit so that it ombres into that Andes. So now that we're moving on to glittering the main 3 colors of our beach, I'm just, again, kind of similar to the spray paint, going to start out with a lighter coverage, and then we'll go back in to do a heavier coverage. But right now we want to just get our colors laid out. So for Andes, I'm just going right kind of in the middle of that Island Girl paint strip and getting good coverage right in the middle. And now I'm tilting my tumbler down so that it ombres into that mermaid. I'm going to repeat it so that it ombres softly into that Mo allowance. My hand is about 10 to 12 inches away from my cup. The general rule for ombre is tilt and pray. I'm kind of kidding, but not really. So the further you have your hand away from your cup, the softer your ombre is going to be. And as you get closer, the stronger the ombre is going to be. So just kind of like a general rule to keep in mind as you're doing ombres on your tumblers. So now that I've laid out my Andes, I'm going to go in with my Seafoam. This color, you guys, your jaw is going to drop when you see this. It's so darn pretty. So the same exact thing I did with the Andes, I'm going to do just a strip of my Seafoam right in the middle of that mermaid paint. And then I'm going to tip my tumbler kind of up and down, and it's going to softly ombre into the colors on each side of it. Now, Seafoam is a medium cut fusion glitter. That means it's going to ombre a little bit faster than a fine glitter would. So keep that in mind. Take your time. Don't rush it. There's no prize for getting this done super quick. But I want to be very careful not to get it down into the Andes or the Mo allowance. I really want it to be on like the top third of my cup. So to focus at first, I'm going to do that very top rim so I get good solid coverage. And then I'm going to gently, very gently, and very lightly sprinkle on this Tommy. And as I'm doing this, my camera gets a little out of focus because the glitter is so sparkly. But I am literally aiming for that very top rim of the cup, and I'm just gently tilting my cup down. It's not a very harsh angle, just very ever so gently. Now, once I get kind of my layout done with Tommy and how far I want it down, I'm going to gently just tap my glitter shaker. I have my hand about 12 inches away from my tumbler. You can see I'm constantly spinning it too, and this is so I don't get like a big bloop of that Tommy. So I kind of simultaneously turn and tap, and that's really going to help you get a soft ombre into that Seafoam with the stronger Tommy color. So I'm going to continue this process until I like my coverage, until I like how my ombre looks. Now I am going to keep in mind I'm going back in with the Seafoam when I'm done with Tommy to ombre that up a little bit into the Tommy so that it's nice and even as far as how my color fades. Now we're going to go back through with our other 4 glitters, kind of similar to what we did with the spray paint. So the first round, we just kind of get things outlined, get it mapped out, and now we're going to go in and really perfect our ombre and perfect our coverage. And so here, my hand is so far up, you can't see it in the screen. It's probably about 14 inches away from my tumbler, and I'm doing something very similar to what I did with Tommy. I have my cup tilted at kind of a harsh angle, but not super harsh. And I'm gently tapping the side of that Seafoam glitter bottle. And this is just so that I'm getting a little bit sprinkling on at a time. Again, I'm simultaneously moving my cup, and I'm going to continue this until I get a soft ombre like what I'm looking for. Now, once again, we're going to repeat that with Andes. Now, Andes is such a soft color that I'm going to go in a little bit heavier on this ombre into the Seafoam because I want to make sure I'm getting good coverage with that Andes, that it's not just kind of getting lost in that Seafoam. Where it's a fine cut and it is a super delicate color, it's okay to go a little bit more heavy-handed as you're ombreing it into a darker color. Another thing to remember, as you're ombreing a beach tumbler, we're going to go in with some epoxy and some mica powder and paint and all that and make waves. And so if there's a spot in your ombre that you're not totally happy with, don't worry about it. You can always cover it up. Nobody's going to know it but you. So I'm going to ombre that Andes up into the Seafoam. I'm going to tilt it just a teeny bit, you guys saw there, to get a little bit into that Mo allowance, but not a lot. I don't want a big ombre between those 2 colors. Now to finish off my glitter, I'm going to go back in with that Mo allowance. I'm just gently tapping it so that I can make that a little bit more of a statement on my tumbler. And then I'm going to repeat the process with the Baroque. The Baroque you don't need to go in super heavy with. Just go back over it and make sure your coverage is good. And then you're going to go ahead, put your cup back on the turner, and let it cure. After your epoxy is fully cured, you're going to go ahead and give it a coat of your Rust-Oleum clear gloss sealer or whatever sealer you prefer. Let that dry, put a coat of epoxy on it, let that coat of epoxy cure, and I'll see you once that's done. All right, let's do some waves on our tumbler. So I have just a thin coat of epoxy on my tumbler. It is uncured. I just put it on here before I started recording. And then I'm going to take what's left of my epoxy and split it between 2 cups. I'm so sorry I don't have measurements of how much I used. I have 8 cup turners and I just mix up a whole bunch at a time. But when in doubt, always mix up a little more than you think you need. So in my first cup, I'm going to put a little drop of just white acrylic paint. This is from the Glitter Guy. It came in a sub box. I'm also going to be using a little bit of this Armor Art from CC DIY. This stuff just helps you make cells. It is, though, incredibly thick, and I've had this for like a couple of years now, but it's always been that thick. Maybe it's not anymore, but anyway, this stuff makes really good cells on your epoxy and helps your waves just look super foamy. So just do that until you get kind of the color that you desire. So I want mine to be semi-opaque, but not super strong, if that makes sense. So now I'm going to go in with some Micas that my camera won't focus on, but these are both from the Glitter Guy. Me struggling here. It is, there we go, Avocado Ice and Bright White, and I'm going to put a good scoop of each of those into that second cup of epoxy. So I'm going to go ahead and give those a really good stir. I like to do the mixture of micas in 1 cup and some paint in the other because the mica is just going to be a softer effect to my waves, if that makes sense. You guys will see when we get there. So mix that up really well. And now I'm going to grab my paint first, or my paint cup, I guess I should say. And I'm going to take my little silicone stick and I'm just going to start drizzling little lines on my tumbler. So I like to just dip my silicone stick in, I let it drip a little bit in my cup, and then once it gets thin, I just swipe it over my tumbler. And don't think too much when you're doing this. Really just let your mind be free. If you overthink it, you mess it up. At least that's how I am. So I'm just going to do some lines until I'm like, that looks pretty good. Don't overdo it in the beginning. You can always go back and add more, but you can't take them off. And I'm really sorry if you guys can hear my toddler eating a green bean in the background. Anyway, we're going to ignore that and move on. So now I prefer to use my own breath through a straw. I know some people use like a heat gun. You can use whatever is easiest for you or what you're used to, but if you haven't tried a straw, I definitely recommend it. It gives you a lot of control. So what I'm doing here is I'm just taking my straw and I'm just either going right on top of that stripe of white, or I'm going kind of right from the bottom of it so that it blows upwards, and I'm just gently blowing through the straw. And I will kind of take a break every now and then from blowing on these because it can make you a little bit lightheaded, but it's so worth it, I promise. So just do a few at a time, take a little bit of a break, and then go back. And now I kind of like to go in and fan out some of those waves. And so I like to take my straw, and as I'm blowing into it, just kind of push it upwards with the motion of the air and the motion of the straw. You get these really pretty kind of like breaks in the wave. Once I'm happy with that, I'm going to take my second cup of epoxy with those mica powders in there, and I'm going to go right over those waves. Some of them I will go kind of right in the middle of, some of them I will put a stripe right underneath, and then I'll also kind of put a few just strips of this cup of epoxy randomly around my cup, and now I'm just repeating the process with my straw. So I like this because when you're on the beach and you look out to the horizon and you see the waves breaking, it's not just a bunch of solid white lines. Some of them are stronger, they're more foamier, some of them are softer, they're all different kinds of shapes. So there's really no right or wrong way that you can do this. Again, don't overthink it. Just go in with a free mind and just let your tumbler kind of tell you what needs to be done with it. My biggest suggestion when doing waves on your tumbler is once you look at it and you're like, oh, that looks pretty good, walk away. Just walk away, because if you don't, you will totally mess it up. At least that's my experience. So I'm going to continue this process until I get some waves and little wispies that I like. I prefer to go and have wispies up at the top, all the way down, kind of lightly into my sand. Again, you can do it however you want to. This is your tumbler, your craft room, your rules. This is also the perfect way if you have like a spot in your ombre, like I said earlier, that you didn't really love. You can always go back with some of this like epoxy mixture and cover those up. So now the final part of making my waves, I like to do the paint cup again, and I'm just taking super thin strips of that, and you kind of see my hand looked a little bit shaky. It's because I was literally just like zigzagging it on there just to give a few of my waves a little bit more shape, and I kind of like to add a few little extra waves in there. Then I'll go in with a popsicle stick, and I'm just going over those heavier little zigzags that I just put in there, if that makes sense. And again, I'm just kind of weaving my hand up and down as I do this to create a little bit of shape and movement. So I'll go until I think to myself, hey, this looks pretty good, and then I'm going to walk away. I'm going to let it fully cure. After this layer cures, sometimes it will cure really nice and smooth. Sometimes you'll have to have one more coat of epoxy over it. It just depends on your tumbler. Mine, I never really know until it's cured. This one, I didn't need another coat of epoxy over my wave, so I was able to move right on to decals. If your tumbler feels kind of like bumpy, go ahead and put another coat on before moving on to your decal. Here she is after I have finished up my waves. I'm happy with how they look. I am obsessed with this tumbler already. I'm going to go ahead and let this cure like I said, and we'll move on to decals. For the decals on this tumbler, I just wanted something soft, just a simple quote, a few little things in the sand. So I ended up typing this up myself in Cricut Design Space. So the font I used is called Saturday, and that's from KA Font Designs on Etsy. I will link her down below. So I typed it up on Cricut Design Space. I made a 0.03 offset. I cut the offset out of white vinyl, and then the top text and the little sandals and the shell for the sand I cut out of like a champagne colored textured vinyl from Tech Wrap. I of course will link that in the description as well. That vinyl, oh my gosh, the textured vinyl, that's the first time I've used it. I literally just got it in the mail the day I put the decal in this cup, and it's stinking beautiful. So because this text is so kind of loopy, I'm going to use the top edge of my backing to measure that my decal goes on straight. I know that the top of that is straight because I cut it on my little scrapbook cutter. So I'm just going to go ahead and measure, get it on straight, and apply that offset. I'm doing this the same way I do all my other decals. I have that little extra piece of transfer tape holding it there. I pull it up, remove the backing, push down the middle, rub my hands on the side. Good to go. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to that textured gold vinyl for our main words. And if you have seen any of my other tutorials, you know that I layer my vinyl in a different way. I do it word by word because I just think it's easier. So the first thing I'm going to do is go in with these two little flip-flops in this cute little starfish. Again, I just found these in Cricut Design Space. You can use whatever you want. There's tons in Cricut. I'm sure there's some on Google or Etsy, wherever you want to find them. Just pick ones that you like and put little details in your sand. Now this vinyl is very close to the color of the sand, so I'm going to make sure I put these kind of next to, or on top of rather, one of my little white wispies that I made. But I want it to be really soft and almost kind of blend in, like I don't want them to stick out. I just want them to be there but also not be there. That doesn't make sense, but that's how my brain works. So then I'm just taking out these little tiny pieces in the flip-flops because I didn't weed them on my paper because those lines are just super fine. Now, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to layer on my text, and then after that's finished, I'll go ahead and give my tumbler 2 more coats of epoxy and it will be totally finished. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you found this tutorial helpful, maybe a little bit inspirational. If you did, I would love a thumbs up on my video. If you want to see more tutorials in the future, please go ahead and follow my channel. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy crafting.